Welcome everyone to our live session on the Level 4 Certificate in Education and Training, also previously known as the Kettles. Before Tony gets started, I just wanted to run through just the ground rules very briefly. Simply no spam or bad behavior, obviously, and keep writing your questions in the chat. If you don't want to write them in the public chat, there's also an icon for a single speech bubble. That means it's a private chat. You can send them to me privately, and I'll be answering the questions in the chat as we go along. Tony will obviously be answering them during his presentation, but we will cover any other questions at the end. So what we're going to cover today is basically in front of you right now. So there's a brief introduction to the course, the different jobs and sectors it applies to, previous versions of the course and other related qualifications. And Tony will obviously be mentioning the units and the optional units and that are involved in the course. We will be going over the observed and assessed teaching practice, and especially how we're going to be assessing that during the COVID-19 scenario, you know, wherever in the world you are and whatever the status of the lockdown is and what we'll be doing. And obviously, of course, Tony will be going through each of the courses and the units and what we're looking for with regards to the assessment of each unit. Just a little bit about Tony himself. So Tony is an extremely popular 5-star rated tutor for ELN. He covers the Level 3 AET and the Level 4 CET with us, and sometimes some of the assessor ones as well. Generally, I mean, he has a very, expansive training career going back to the 90s all the way through different industries and sectors. And different kinds of environments, online and offline. And, we have him here today with us, and I'm sure all of you will appreciate the wisdom and expertise that is going to show through. So without further ado, Tony, over to you.
I wish I knew who this Tony was. He sounds absolutely amazing. I can't wait to meet him. Hello, everyone, and thanks ever so much for joining us today. As San has already said, we're going to be looking at the Level 4 education Certificate in Education and Training, the CET, formerly known as Kettles, but that really is historical. It was a while ago. Let's start by looking at the actual qualification itself and giving an overview of why indeed you might actually be thinking of doing it or have perhaps even signed up. This qualification is for anyone who wishes to teach or train in an area in which they're qualified. We have many different people coming to us to study with us in ELN. I have at the moment lots of students who work in various police training colleges around the country, delivering education and training to serving officers, newly recruited officers. We have people from the healthcare industry, health and safety. Virtually any qualification that you can think of that you've got, you could bring to us, and we could then add on a training qualification in the form of the CET to enable you to go out and deliver your skill and your knowledge to other people. Now, the CET is a Level 4, so it's not a trivial qualification by any means. It is actually internationally recognized as well as nationally, and we offer a couple of different awarding bodies. The choice is yours, and there is no difference in terms of the qualification, but know that it is professionally, it is recognized and accredited both in the UK and transferable to other countries, internationally recognized. What we actually pride ourselves on is that your experience with us will be complete. You know, we offer everything within the package that you will need in order to complete. But what we hope is that as you go through your learning journey with us, you will be inspired to go and find out more. We welcome students who go and do extra research. In fact, that is one of the things that we encourage and also require as part of the Level 4. Now, make no mistake, this qualification it's not going to be done overnight. You're not going to be able to throw yourself at it in a week or a fortnight, because there are quite a few different elements that need to come together. So we offer the study materials that you need. We offer all of the assignment templates and research and reading material that you'll need to bring all this information together, so that as you progress through the qualification, you can demonstrate to both myself and the awarding body that you have a good understanding, and that by the time you reach the end, you will be as knowledgeable as about teaching and training in your chosen environment as you can be, full of confidence and ready to get on with the job. We do have people approach us on this for this course who are already in teaching and training positions. Often you find in industry these days, people progress through their career, they become very experienced at something, and eventually they're offered the opportunity to teach that particular specialism or skill. So it is possible to actually be teaching in a classroom or some other environment without having a formal qualification. But what we're finding now more and more is that companies or schools or colleges are actually looking for people to be formally trained and hold a recognised qualification. We also have people coming to us for this qualification who aren't actually in a role yet, and it is possible. It's a little bit harder to facilitate that, but what we would always recommend for this qualification is that you speak to one of our online advisors. If you've got any concerns, you can be put in touch with either myself or one of the other tutors to actually, so that we can understand your own personal circumstance and advise you in the best way possible. So what I'd like to do now is go through and look at each of the units that you'll be studying in more detail. There are a number of different units. We'll start by looking at Unit 1. And this is where we start to look at the roles and responsibilities and relationships in education and training. What is it that you're going to have to do as a teacher or a tutor? Where do the boundaries lie in terms of what you can help with versus what you need other people to help with? And those relationships are really key. The relationship that you have with your students, your work colleagues, your peers, and other people within your organisation, and indeed outside of the organisation. This is where we start to really look at the core aspects of being a teacher, how to understand your students, get to know them, look at their needs, and then start to think about bringing those needs into your environment and how can you help that student to achieve the qualification that they want, get the information that they need within any sort of constraining situations. We will look at planning. I'm sure we can all agree that if you plan something, you are much more likely to deliver something that is useful, needed, and possibly even expected. We'll look at delivery techniques. You'll get a really good understanding of how to pick the most appropriate technique for the subject and for your audience. We'll look at assessing and also evaluating yourself and the learning that's taken place. And all of those things are known as the teacher training cycle. It'll look in depth at some of the legislation that may specifically apply to your area, and also things like behaviour, equality and diversity, incredibly important aspects that all come together to make the classroom a lively, educational and safe space to be. Now, Unit 1 is, in theory, you can do the units in any order, but I always recommend starting with Unit 1 because it always, it's fairly standalone, and it gives you a great sense of, first of all, what you need to do in order to succeed in the qualification. You'll understand what we're looking for in terms of the assessment criteria. You'll understand how you need to approach things. You'll kind of cut your teeth really and get back into the mode of learning. Once you've completed Unit 1, start thinking about moving on to Unit 2. And this is where we're looking at the planning, especially to meet the needs of learners. One of the really important things in terms of understanding education and training is knowing that you can have virtually anyone come through your door and want to be taught by whatever skill you've got. And it's understanding what each of those people bring in terms of how experienced are they, what background knowledge have they got, what's their situation, how well motivated are they, do they want to be doing this course, or is it something that's been mandated on them, and how to unpick, gather all of that information together and turn it into and make use of it so that you can turn your sessions into something that's going to reach out to each of these people. So very much focusing on needs, motivations and circumstances of the learners, and then taking that information and putting it into practical things that you can work on to make this experience positive for them. Part of this section is creating what's known as a scheme of work. And the scheme of work is a high-level overview of your program or chunk of information that you're going to share. It lays out what you're going to do, but it doesn't necessarily describe how you're going to do it. You then have to create some lesson plans, and I'll talk about the purpose of those in a little bit more detail later on. You create 3 lesson plans, and they very much take the scheme of work and turn it into the how you're going to deliver these sessions. You'll also do some work on case studies, three fictional areas of importance using a bit of background research and your previous experience and knowledge to think about various things. And this unit actually has dependencies on some of your observations being done as well. So it's probably the most complicated. And I'll talk about how to tackle each of the units in a few more slides' time. So just hold on to the thought of the 3 plans and the scheme of work. A lot of this course is evidence-based. So not only do you have to complete your units, but we also have to be able to see your teaching methods or get them observed by a qualified practitioner, and that's your observations. So you have to bring together not only the theory assignment, but also some supporting evidence in terms of your plans, your feedback, and the scheme of work. So really this course, the success or the key to this course is actually about being organised. It's no more complicated than that. It's understanding what you need to do in order to meet the criteria, having a little plan in your mind, having a little mind map down of what documents you're going to need, where you might be able to provide some supporting evidence, and bringing everything together as you go through the course. Unit 2 is typically the assignment that most students take the longest over because of this dependency on other things. It's not overly complicated, it's all fairly straightforward. It just takes a little bit of time to organise. And this is where I come in as your tutor. My role, if you like, is twofold throughout the whole process. First and foremost, I'm your tutor, I'm your point of contact. I'm there to answer any questions. And part of the course requirements is that you and I will chat before you actually get started, so that I can go through each of these things in detail with you and really get to know you. So actually I am following what you are now going to be learning about. The process of getting to know students is important so that I can tailor what I need to do to meet your needs. The other function that I have is reviewing or assessing your work and making sure that it meets the criteria. So I'm there for you throughout the whole process. I'm there to answer questions, and I'm also there to help you meet the criteria. When I review work, this course is not graded in terms of credit, distinction, merit, whatever. It's actually looked at as either a pass or a fail. And I tell you now that failure is not an option. What we do is when you submit something, if I think it's met the criteria, I will turn around and say, this is fantastic, but I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why you meet the criteria, because then if you understand how you've met the criteria this time, you can then repeat that through further work. But I will also say, if something doesn't quite meet the criteria, I'll tell you why it doesn't, which is then, well, it's not just a clue, it's a direction of where you need to go in terms of research or send in your answer so that you do actually achieve the qualification. You will find that as you go through each assignment in turn, the process becomes much easier, it becomes more instinctive. And by the time, actually, my experience is by the time you've completed the first unit, you've already got in your mind a really clear idea of what you need to do. How do I know all of this? Well, not only have I been tutoring this for several years, but actually I've been in your position. I've been studying the certificate in education and training to become a professionally qualified tutor. And I actually did my studies with ELN. In fact, I've done 4 courses with ELN, so I understand it both from the tutoring side and also from what it's like to be a student. So as I say, Unit 2, it's all about planning to meet the needs of learners, and by the time you come through that unit, you will have a really, really good understanding of what you need to do in your daily tutoring or training to help reach out to every single person that comes into your classroom. Unit 3. Now this is where you actually start to get your hands on practical experience. This is all about using your plans to deliver sessions, thinking about things like safety, comfort, learning styles. Within this, you are delivering specifically, we're focusing on one of your observed sessions, and we're thinking about how your ideas are actually now going to materialize in the classroom. You're going to put this stuff into practice. Also, part of the requirement for the CET is that you have to be able to evidence 30 hours of actual teaching from when you start the course through to completion. So you can't historically cite evidence. It has to be from the point at which you start. And within that 30 hours, you have to include your 3 hours of observed sessions. Don't worry too much if you don't quite understand that at this point. I will come back to that in a few minutes when I talk about the observations and the 30 hours in more detail. But this is another unit that requires other things to be done, because what you're going to be doing is, as part of your delivery, is once you've completed the delivery, you're going to be completing some evaluation, some self-evaluation. How did I do there? You know, how did that go? Did I get the results that I expected? Were the students engaged? Did I have the correct materials in place? All of those things are going to come into your evaluation. We're also going to be using feedback that you get from your students to base some of your answers on. And what we're looking for as well, and if you think about it, it's fairly common sense. The really key skill to pretty much any occupation you can think of, but especially education and training, is the ability to communicate with different people on different levels and about different subjects, and possibly in different contexts. So we're going to look at various communication techniques and skills. So how you can communicate differently with each learner depending on their needs, and also with other professionals, those other people that you can bring in to help you, or that you can learn from, or people that you have a responsibility to. So perhaps the faculty or the company that you work for. We'll also start to think about the benefits of using technology in the workplace. I'm sure we can all see now that you know, technology has become an absolutely integral part of everything that we do in terms of the COVID-19 crisis. It's in many ways, it's enabled people to continue working in some way, shape or form. But there are other technologies that have been around for a long time as well that have a valuable place in the classroom. So this unit 3, it's actually fairly straightforward. By the time you get to this and you start reading the questions, seeing what's required, you will realize that you are well on your way to getting through this qualification. You're using everything that you've studied. You've now started to kind of put all of these ideas into practice and in context, and you'll be seeing it all come together. The unit 4 is the one where we start to look at assessing learners in education and training. There's lots of different methods of assessment, and there's different reasons for carrying out different types of assessments. The one that you'll be focusing on predominantly is what's known as formative assessment, which is how students learn as they're going through your course or your program, and how can you assess that learning. So we'll look at things like how to make sure whatever evidence you gather is valid, authentic, current, sufficient and reliable. And if you like acronyms, then you'll get plenty on this course, because that's one right there. It's called VASCA. And it's the importance of assessment cannot be understated, because as you get to know your students, you need to be able to understand where they're starting from and how they're progressing. And of course, at the end of a qualification, there's often some sort of formal assessment that brings everything together that says, well, has this person met the criteria? Now, for this, it's based on a portfolio of evidence which is gathered over time. But for some, it could well be an exam or a final piece of work or a final demonstration, pass or fail, a lot of pressure. Those are known as summative assessments, where a decision is reached. And assessment has to be woven into the entire education program. First of all, it would be unfair to spring an exam on a student at the end of the course without them having a feeling for what they're trying to achieve or what the expectation is. But also, if you haven't assessed their learning until the end of the course, how do you know if they're going to pass? So assessment is as much a part of education and training as the actual lessons themselves, and it has to be built in. We'll also think about various assessment methods that can be used: peer and self-assessment, tests, exams, questions, demonstrations, all of those kinds of things. We'll also look at the importance of building in the minimum, what's known as the minimum core elements of English, maths, and ICT. Sometimes known also, the other important aspect there is soft skills. How well can your students communicate? How can you build in development of English, understanding English? Well, through speaking, through listening, through questions and answers. So we'll focus in on that. Maths, again, all these important skills that, life skills. If people can't count properly, then how can you go into a shop and pay some money and know if you've got the right change? How can you budget? So we look at the importance of bringing these sorts of things into sessions. ICT, the use of ICT. I think we can all agree and understand now that if people struggle with ICT, then life can be a real challenge. And there are a lot of people out there who don't necessarily have the confidence or the understanding or the background, which is why it's an important aspect or an important responsibility for teachers to have this in mind. Not least of which, because if you have a student, for example, for whom English isn't their first language, how, if you can't speak their native language, can you convey the messages that you're trying to get across? So we will look at, again, Unit 4. It uses some of the feedback from your observations to enable you to answer the questions and be very reflective on what you've done. And again, it focuses in on the self-analysis. There is a common theme running through the entire course, and what we're trying to do is promote awareness of teaching as a career, getting you to understand the role you have as a professional teacher alongside whatever other profession that you have, your doctor, a nurse, your professional police officer, or whatever it is, whatever skill you bring, you are now adding teaching and training to your repertoire, to your portfolio, and that brings responsibilities. So things like continuing professional development. Once you've studied and succeeded in achieving this qualification, how can you make sure your skills and knowledge remain current? How can you make sure that you're still delivering quality and value to your students? And is there anything on the horizon that could actually make your job better, easier, more efficient? So assessing is Unit 4. Unit 5 is all about resources. And again, this is getting you to think about what sort of resources are available to you to make your sessions more lively, more interesting, more engaging. You've also got to think about the way in which people like to learn. We all have learning preferences, learning styles, if you like. And this is picking up on some research that we'll do in Unit 1 and Unit 2 when it comes to thinking about how you can convey learning, understanding the individual needs. For example, do you have someone who's a kinesthetic learner who actually learns best by getting their hands dirty, by trying something for themselves? Do you have someone who prefers to read and research about the subject before they go anywhere near anything more tangible? All of those things are important, and there's all sorts of technology and resources that you can use, video clips online, smart boards, whiteboards, even good old-fashioned pen and paper. Let's not forget that. All of those resources can be brought into the classroom to cater for individual learning needs and to engage with your learners and make your sessions interesting, lively, engaging. We will look at or we will ask you to analyze what methods you've chosen, what technology you've used, using again the feedback, the self-evaluation, come up with that analysis, that conclusion. Did the sessions go well? Was there anything different that you could do? Or has it actually brought a different thought? Well, if I'd done this, maybe we would have had a slightly different sort of idea or outcome. Because that's the other key to this. Life as a teacher can be incredibly rewarding. It's less rewarding if you go into the same classroom every day and deliver the same session in the same way. Potentially, you're not going to be doing it to the same people, so they will never have heard it before. But for you, the interest and the engagement has to be there. So why not try different things? If you find something works, great, go with it. But push yourself, push what you're thinking of, push the boundaries. Can you make something more engaging? Try something different. If it doesn't work, well, don't do it again. Simple as that. But we often learn quite a lot from things that don't go well. I'm sure you have probably experienced that in various aspects of your careers already. You have a go at something that doesn't work. Okay, well, we won't try that again. So those 5 units, units 1 to 5, are what's known as the mandatory units. And I don't want to go into too much detail here, but this qualification is credit-based. You have to earn a minimum number of credits, 36 in total. And by the time you've done those 5 mandatory units, you've actually achieved 21 of the 36 credits. And if you're any good at maths, that leaves you with 15 credits to find. And that is where you make up those credits. This is in your optional units. Now, ELN is one of the only online training providers who offers the full suite of optional units ratified by the awarding bodies. So you've got quite a lot to choose from. And I don't propose to show you the list because it's sort of about 20 odd units. But what I want to do is give you a sort of flavor of the sorts of things that are on offer. So we have things that revolve around assessing, equality and diversity, coaching, mentoring, looking at action learning, the importance of planning a curriculum, working with awarding bodies, working with other organizations, teaching in a specialist area. The suite of options is just incredible. And actually, it can be a bit daunting. And this is where having a chat with your tutor, with me, I can help guide you by listening to the environment that you're in, by listening to the things that you're doing and that you're interested in. Between us, we can select a unit or units that are actually going to be useful to you and engaging with you. And what I always start with are things such as how relevant is something. Try and pick something that's relevant to what you're doing. Try and pick something that interests you, because if it's relevant and interesting to you, then you're going to be more likely to engage with it and to get something from it. We also have to consider whether you can actually achieve the criteria. So for example, some of the assessment organised units, it's very difficult if you're not in the right environment to gather the required evidence to meet the criteria. And again, this is where a one-to-one conversation with me can really help kind of guide you and steer you in the right direction. What you have to consider is making up those 15 credits. Some units are 15 credits in total, so then you're only doing 1 extra unit, and others are slightly fewer credits, so you have to kind of blend, mix and match to add up to the 15. As I've said, the absolute key to this is discussion with myself or whoever your tutor is. At the moment, I believe I'm the only one taking on CET students, but you know, we do have a lot of students. So that individual discussion is really, really key. The actual amount of work that you take on might be a consideration as well. So focusing in on 1 unit rather than doing multiples could well suit you and your available time, etc. slightly better. The next thing to think about is the observations and the 30 hours. Now, I've mentioned this a couple of times as we go through. And let's think about the 30 hours first of all. You must be able in order to meet this qualification, be able to evidence 30 hours of teaching from the start of the course, so from the date that you sign up. So we can't have backdated. Basically, we provide a template you complete every time you go into a classroom, deliver some training, you fill in the required sections. Once you've added up your 30 hours, you sign it. You get someone in your organisation in authority, maybe a line manager or supervisor or someone in authority, to sign that off, and you've got your 30 hours. You can do that over the course. Those 30 hours must include your 3 hours of observations, because the other requirement for this course is that you must complete observations totaling 30 hours. The criteria laid down says each session must be a minimum of 30 minutes, and then they add up to 3 hours. Personally, I always recommend doing hour chunks because it's much easier for you. It's less intricate, less involved, and it's easier to manage. You write your lesson plan, you deliver your session. Now, this session must be observed by someone who is a qualified teacher, which means level 4 or above. It can't be an assessor. They can have assessment qualifications, but assessment qualifications on their own don't qualify them to assess teaching practice. You must be a qualified teacher. And actually, one of the advantages of having a CET, the level 4, is that when you achieve the qualification, you will be entitled to assess and observe teaching practice because you are a professional teacher. Now, that person, there's a number of different ways of working this. If there is someone in your organisation who holds this qualification, that's perhaps the easiest thing, because they can come along to one of your sessions, complete the observation. We provide all the material that they need to carry out the observation. We provide a form, and they must complete it to Ofqual standards and specification, all of which are contained within the course material. And I'm always available to discuss the requirements with whoever's going to observe you. In order for us to make sure that this person does have the suitable qualification in terms of the audit trail and evidence for your portfolio, we would need to see their certificate and their CV. 2 key aspects to any role, but especially teaching and training. First of all, you've got to be qualified. And secondly, you have to be current. And this is perhaps the biggest revolution that's shaking up the teaching industry now, in that there are lots of people in teaching roles who they maybe did a qualification a long time ago. They haven't really done anything much with it since. And now all of a sudden they're in a position to be teaching. Well, how relevant and current are their skills? So there's an awful lot of companies now are focusing in on, you know, well, you got this qualification 25, 30 years ago. You've done nothing with it since. Maybe it's time to just brush up on those skills. Providing that person is qualified, then they can carry out your observations. Incidentally, if you have within your organisation a process and forms that are already used and they meet the requirements, then you don't have to use the material that we provide. All we need to do is see whatever it is that you used beforehand and work out whether it meets the criteria. If it does, then great, and actually your job becomes a lot easier because you haven't got to create anything specific. If you don't have anyone or access to anyone who's qualified, then we can arrange remote observations carried out by myself using some sort of digital technology, Zoom, Skype, that sort of thing. That's possible. So again, with the observations, it's important to have the conversation with me beforehand so we can kind of come up with a plan so that you understand the requirements, and then on the day itself, everything goes smoothly and there's no worries, and we don't get to the end and go, well, actually, this isn't valid. At the moment, these qualifications are all based around face-to-face teaching. There's no minimum number of students, so it can be one or many. But the sessions must be face-to-face. I'll talk a little bit about the COVID-19 situation in a minute, but really it's down to an individual discussion with me to look at your own personal circumstances and then work out a bespoke plan, if you like. So face-to-face, no minimum number of students, And as you go through, you get your student feedback. That forms part of your evidence and your self-evaluation. So those are the 3 sessions. I realise as well that there's actually a lot to take in through this. We really are going through it at quite a rate. So don't worry. I see there's a couple of questions already popping up. I'm sure Sana has been doing her best to field, or maybe she's leaving them to the end for me. And if anybody wants a discussion with me afterwards, then you just need to get in touch with ELN and we can have a kind of one-to-one if you like. That's not a problem at all. The assignments themselves, I promised you I'd give you a little bit of a view about how to approach the assignments. And each assignment you have to approach with the same thing in mind. First of all, remember that this is a professional qualification. So we're going to be looking for good standards of both English language, nice clear descriptions, you know, no spelling mistakes, grammatical errors. Think sort of A-level standard, if you like, if that makes any sense to you. But work that is nicely presented, coherent. Feel free to use diagrams, make it interesting, paragraph style. It's not quite academic writing, but it's certainly of a professional standard, okay? Every single question is taken directly from the assessment criteria for the qualification. All of our templates follow the same model. So if you follow the questions and you answer what it's asking you to, you will be in the right area for the criteria for that specific element. What you need to do when you answer each question is keep some things in mind. First of all, you must explain the theory in your own words. We encourage research, going away, looking at books, looking on the internet, all sorts of things. All of that is good. Anyone can copy things from the internet or repeat it word for word. That doesn't show me understanding. When you use your own words, I see you, I hear you, and I know that you've started to actually grab hold of and understand the theory that you're explaining. The other really good way of demonstrating understanding is bringing in examples of your own teaching and your own practice. What do you do in your training environment? That might be in the classroom, it might be out in the workplace, who knows? It could be working on a building site, training bricklayers or whatever. It could be teaching health and safety in a factory or an office. It could be whatever it is. How does this theory show itself in your environment? So those examples are critical. If you don't have much teaching or training experience, don't worry, because you can talk about things hypothetically. I would do this in my environment. I would do that. But bearing in mind, you've actually got to be in a live training environment for 30 hours, including those 3 hours of observation. You're going to have plenty of material to actually bring into your assignments as well. Okay, so explain the theory in your own words, bring in examples. I've mentioned a little bit numerous times about research, going away and looking at some of the theories that you will discover and learn about, building up that knowledge, maybe something that you've never heard of before that actually grabs your attention and your interest. Bring that research back into your assignments as well. Because in order to meet the criteria for this, theory in your own words and examples, and what we're looking for is for you to support your answers with either research, evidence of research using Harvard referencing, or supporting evidence. And supporting evidence is, as I was mentioning before, perhaps your lesson plans. You'll talk about your lesson plans in some of your answers, and it will ask you to evaluate your lesson plans. Have you included equality and diversity, minimum core, various teaching training techniques? What assessment are you using? Well, those plans are evidence that you've done this or not. So you have to be able to reference those plans. And this is where having a little mind map or an overview of what you're trying to achieve is so important, because as you look through a question, you say, I can provide evidence for this. This is my plans, or we've actually got a form that we use within our organisation that would meet this, or maybe there's some awarding body criteria or a specification. All of those things can be brought into your portfolio as supporting evidence. Research, examples, clear explanations. As you approach the first unit, unit 1, this is where you start to bring all of this together. By the time you've completed unit 1, all of this becomes second nature to you, because with my help and guidance, my goal is exactly the same as yours: reaching qualification, achieving this qualification, and it's in my interest as well as yours to help you understand what's needed. So don't worry unduly. It's a process that we go through. For many of you, it could have been a while since you actually studied anything or did any formal writing. You are not alone. That was true for me too. It's not impossible. In fact, most students I find that I've worked with, they find it actually quite an engaging process and quite absorbing. That's how to tackle the assignments. The recent situation, remote assessment. This qualification, as I've already said, is a lot is based on actual live practice in the classroom, face to face. Now, at the moment, that's still not possible for a lot of you. We do have some guidance for the awarding body, but what we really have to do is come up with a bespoke solution for you. So I can give some sort of broad outlines in that they are accepting one remote assessment, digital, using Zoom or something like that, but the other 2 must be face to face. So whatever your particular situation is, please don't worry. We can resolve it simply with a chat with you and me, so that we can come up with the best plan to help you meet the requirements. There are so many permutations and possibilities out there that it would take, well, the rest of today to go through them, and it still wouldn't be comprehensive. So let's have that one-to-one chat, either with myself or perhaps, you know, one of our other members of staff who can advise you how best to cope with that. Bearing in mind that you've got a year to achieve this qualification, it might be that the simplest or the best solution is to defer these things until such time as the situation eases. Already children are going back into the classroom. We know that firms will be starting to get back into business now. You know, we've seen the easing of the situation. So for many of us, it's just around the corner when we can actually get back into the classroom. So please don't worry about it. It's best resolved with a one-to-one discussion, so that we can actually work out what you need and what fits you. Completion. There we are. We're nearly there. You will get to the end. Once everything has been marked and assessed and deemed to meet the criteria, your portfolio is submitted to the awarding body. The whole process is that I assess work as we go through. Do not save it all till the end and give me 5 or 6 days solid work. I won't thank you for it. And actually the potential for something not being quite right and then having to unpick a whole bunch of stuff is quite high. So I'm going to demand that that we share work as you go through, so that I can keep an eye on things and that you can feel you're making progress. Once everything's been assessed and passed by me, it's viewed by our IQA. We always do an IQA, an internal quality assurance check, to make sure that I've done my job properly and that everything is upholding the standards of the awarding body. ELN is a direct claim company, so that means that we can just apply for your certificate directly. The awarding body may not actually review your portfolio. Everything is kept on record and stored and available for viewing. And in fact, we have such a good relationship with the awarding bodies. They sample our work twice a year. They look at existing students and completed students. We have such a good relationship with them. This is why we have the direct claim status. They know and trust us to uphold their standards, provide first-class support for students, and to just, well, we're a great company, to be fair. Why wouldn't we be? I've studied with them 4 times. I've thoroughly enjoyed each experience, had some fantastic support, and that's exactly what I want for you. So the qualification, once everything's gone through, everything's been processed, your certificate will be issued. Depending on who you choose will depend on how long that comes out. It's anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks typically. I had a student receive their certificate yesterday in the post. They were absolutely delighted. They were texting me when they got home from work at whatever time it was to say it's arrived, and they sent me a picture. So it's fantastic. And make no mistake, when that certificate drops through the door, you know that you have completed a professional qualification. You have invested a significant amount of time, effort, and energy. You have achieved something really quite special. Make no mistake of that. So don't be afraid to celebrate that qualification, that achievement. Celebrate before they get the certificate if you want. But when the certificate drops through the door and you see it in front of you, it's an amazing feeling. Trust me. I've experienced that 4 times now, and it's almost addictive. In fact, I think I probably am addicted to education and training. Anyway, that's pretty much everything I have to say on the course. I hope that it's been useful. I see that there are some questions. I'm going to give my voice a break for a minute and let Sana chip in. So,
Hi, Tony, can you hear me now?
yes. I can.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so that was wonderful, really comprehensive. Thank you very much. I mean, I really enjoyed listening to all the information. And it's really wonderful how every time I feel like, you know, we've answered all the questions, but there's still so many questions. So let's get started with them. So one of them is actually quite specific. So we have a person here who owns a sewing factory with over 25 staff. And she has been training that staff. So she's just asking, is this the right qualification for her?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I was just having a drink, and I think my brain disengaged while I was having a drink. So training, this qualification really fits into any industry, any business, any organization that you can think of. The key to it is you have to have a qualification in the subject that you're teaching. And this is actually something that I missed out in my comprehensive summary earlier on, so I do apologize. So this question is a great opportunity for me to address that. Whatever it is that you're teaching or training, you have to have a qualification in that. And whatever teaching and training you deliver must be at the level or below that you're qualified at. I hope that makes sense. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. So you kind of touched on that, but basically there was another question. So if somebody has qualifications or experience in 2 different unrelated sectors, if they do this course, would they be able to then train in both the sectors? So I think if you go in a little bit more detail about, you know, what is sector competence, how would we define that, and how would they be qualified to teach in it?
Yeah, so again, it comes back to, you know, what qualifications do you have in what particular sector? So probably the easiest way to answer that is to explain a little bit about my background. I'm a qualified engineer. I spent some time in the Royal Air Force, and I have engineering qualifications in a number of different disciplines. So I haven't used those qualifications for a while, other than going out in the garage and tinkering with my motorcycle, but that's okay. So in theory, I could use my teaching and training qualification to go and teach engineering workshop practice, because it is a qualification that I hold. Whether a company would hire me to do that based on, I haven't really had much current hands-on experience of that or not is another issue, but in theory I could teach that. I'm also a qualified advanced driver and rider, and that is much more current. So I can use this level 4 qualification to go and teach those skills to other people, providing I don't exceed the level that I'm actually currently at. And this qualification entitles you to both deliver what we might call classroom-based studies or theory, so the theoretical side of something, and also vocational, so the actual hands-on practical things as well. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. I mean, how would you define sector competence? Does it always have to be a qualification?
That's a good question, and not necessarily. The real thing to this is understanding the sector that you're working in and what they demand. Some areas have very rigid rules, if you like. But engineering is a good one, you know, not just from the health and safety perspective, but also, you know, engineering practice is well defined around the globe, and there are standards that you have to achieve in order to gain qualifications and formally recognised at an international level. Other sectors might be a little bit more niche, a little bit more bespoke. They might not have a massive overriding organisation or sort of awarding body or anything, or controlling governance. It is much more bespoke, and therefore, you know, there's a little bit more freedom and flexibility, if that makes sense. I can't think of a good example off the top of my head because you've put me on the spot, Sana. Thank you.
It's okay. I think you've covered the question anyway. Yeah, so we've already had a request for a one-to-one, so I'll connect you afterwards. But I think, yeah, so some of them are quite specific. So, you know, I mean, you answered it by saying that really sometimes is industry specific. So I've also had a question in the private chat with regards to, for example, if someone is dyslexic or has any other learning difficulties, so can we help?
Absolutely. One of the, I have no idea what it's like to be dyslexic, or you know, whatever you may feel could be a barrier. Please, let's talk about those things and see how we can work it in. It's very much a sort of individual tutor-student discussion. If you make me aware of whatever it is you feel may be a barrier, then we can work out how best to help you. And if you know, I'm not experienced in everything, I'm not a subject matter expert in this, but we can, between us, we can come up with a plan that means that you can achieve this qualification. I don't want to go into too much detail. I do have students who suffer from dyslexia, and often they can bring the solutions themselves. They understand, you know, what things they may typically struggle with, and therefore I can take that into account, make allowance, provide extra help, extra support. The whole beauty of this is that I can tailor my approach to help you achieve this qualification. Does that make
Yep,
that makes
that's
sense?
Great. Thank you so much, Tony. There are a couple of questions about the different optional units. Can you tell us more just about, maybe, I think what would help would be if you cover a couple of the popular optional units, and when would they be booking the optional units? You know, they don't need to book it when they're actually purchasing the course. We can deal with it afterwards.
Absolutely, yes. And what I always say to students, again, it comes down to this personal discussion. One optional unit that is very, very popular, and it's actually one that I did myself, is teaching in a specialist area. And what that unit does is, first of all, it's 15 credits at the right level. So it's just another unit, folks. One more onto the pile. But what it does is it takes a lot of what you've covered in the previous units, but focuses in on what those different skills, so for example, learning styles, legislation, assessment, but what do they really look like in your area of specialism? Is it something that's actually covered in your area of specialism? When I was doing mine, there wasn't really any assessment in the area that I was looking at, and which I thought was a massive gap. And as part of my course, I started thinking about how can we build assessment in, and I was able to take that back to the organisation that I was working in at the time, and they were like, "Oh wow, this is cool. We never thought of that." So teaching in a specialist area is a very, very popular module because it fits absolutely any situation. It's about understanding the theory and doing more research and then relating that to your own area of specialism. Other ones that come up are there's one which is based a lot around equality and diversity. I mean, this is such an important subject these days, and being inclusive. So we study in much more detail the Equality and Diversity Acts of 2010. We look at the 9 protected characteristics. We look at various things that can be done in the classroom to enable positive teaching and learning experiences for anyone, irrespective of race, creed, colour, sexual orientation, all of those things. That's quite a popular one. Others, if people choose to mix and match, then there's one on mentoring and one on coaching, two different subjects. They're quite interesting as well, because
sorry, Tony, would you prefer me to screen share? I've got the optional units list in front of me, and then it might be easier for you to.
Yeah, you could do. I mean, I wasn't going to go into much more detail, but yeah, I mean, if you screen share the list, they'll see just how long it is.
It'll just, yeah, it might give people
flavour. Yeah, absolutely. Do that, Sana, please. It's a good idea.
Okay, just
That's
let me
why
know.
you're the boss, isn't it? No, I'm not. Ideas. So I don't know if people can see that. Sana's sort of zooming in now. There is a lot to choose from. I said earlier on, the key to this is actually this discussion with me. Have a discussion with me about what's going to help you and be best for you, something that's interesting, something that's relevant, and that's really the best way to approach this. Yeah. Do you think that's can you oh yes, all right, can you complete more units than the requirements? Yes, absolutely, if you want to. Not a problem.
Okay, brilliant.
We can offer. We can also offer, sorry,
yeah.
Sana, I was just going to say, Ori's reminded me, we can offer some units of CPD, continuing professional development, as well. So standalone, if someone wants a flavour or a taste of what it's like to study with us.
Absolutely. Is my screen share off now, or is it?
Yes, I think it is, and that's probably my fault, because I think I pushed a button to try and see the actual list.
No. So it's meant to be that way, so that's fine. Okay. I think we've showed the list. Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. So you've answered that question already, and I did want to mention, while we're on the topic of the optional units, that we do offer the IQA units that qualify you to be an internal verifier. We do offer those free with the CET. So yeah, you will get a 25% off discount code at the end when we end the session, and you get the email. You will get a video link to watch it again in case you've missed anything, and there is a timed deadline, I think, with the discount. So please, if you need to basically schedule a one-to-one beforehand or something like that, then keep an eye on that time limit and get in touch as soon as possible. But yeah, the IQA is free with that, even including that discount. So it's a pretty good deal. So that's it. So Tony, is there anything else that you feel like you wanted to add, or if there are any other questions from the audience, please let me know.
Okay, well, I think I've probably added enough. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but I would like to say thank you to everyone for turning up and listening and for asking the great questions. I really, really hope it was useful for you. I see we had a few more people join, so it's great. I think I recognise some of the names on there as well. So hopefully it's inspired you to either carry on with the course that you've signed up for, or come and join us and see what it's all about and see why I can't keep away.
Yeah, definitely. I think there might be something wrong on my end, because I cannot see more than 3 or 4 learners actually, and Sarah's been messaging me that there's quite a lot more online. So if I've missed anyone's questions, or if for some reason I can't see everyone, or if I've missed your private chat as well, then please, you can always email us, and we can connect you with the tutor, and we can answer your questions. So yeah, okay, we have time for one last question.
Yeah, from R8, for the level 5, do you need to do the level 4 first? No, you don't, is the short answer to that. and just compare the two. But no, you don't need to do the level 4 first.
Brilliant. So I think that's everything. There's no more questions. Thank you very much, Tony, for your insight and your answers, and you know, all the explanations that you've given to all the questions. And it was really, really informative. I enjoyed it as well. I'm sure everyone else enjoyed it too. Thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you for your interaction and your questions. Thank you for being here. And you will get a link to the video, and we hope to see you on board soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy the weekend.